Hello everyone, and thank you for having me today. Can I just ask for a show of hands, who here has had someone in their life struggle with something? You don't have to look very far to see it. It's everywhere, but it's actually hiding in plain sight. I didn't ever intend for this to be an outcome for my life. I just grew up here in Sydney. I worked down the road. And when I was 18, I went and sat down behind a pokie, thinking it was just harmless fun. Before long, I was doing it by myself, before work, after work. I was earning $1,200 a month as a receptionist at an accounting firm, and that would be gone within an hour on payday. That spiral continued for 12 years of my life, to the point where in 2012, after accessing the last money that I had, I just wanted it all to go away. I couldn't keep existing like that. And for me, I had no idea what was happening. All I thought was, what's wrong with me? And when you ask yourself that long enough and you don't have an answer, you sit in I am the problem. What I do now is try and bring struggle to the surface and help people see it clearly, not through the lens of what they've been told it is, and be able to fire up their brain to look for answers. I believe that struggle is the presence of a person, a product, or an environment that is harming your well-being. Write that down. If you're experiencing struggle, there is a person, a product, or an environment that's harming your well-being. So I had to get clear on what well-being was, and why didn't I know about it? Why wasn't I protecting it? That led me to be super curious about human behaviour, where the gaps are, and why people keep falling through it. To understand well-being, and I apologise, I had slides, but you know, myself and technology are not best friends. Can you draw a triangle for me? And well-being, the words well-being in the centre. And on one side of the triangle is self-care. One side of the triangle is self-esteem. And the other side is self-awareness. When you're experiencing struggle, one or all of those elements are being impacted. And instead of, you know, that warning or having the available internal dialogue, we've put labels on people and tried to squish them into a box and say, you are this struggle. Most people I encounter these days will start with their sentence with, well, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm addicted to blah, blah. And I say, no, you're a human being who is struggling with this. That's not who you are. We've fundamentally lost sight of our humanness and being okay with being fallible. We're being defined by our mistakes instead of learning and growing through them. So in understanding our well-being, we can stay intentional and be able to catch ourselves in moments where we feel overwhelmed. You know, who's ever said, I feel overwhelmed at work, or I feel overwhelmed with the children, or I feel overwhelmed? That's actually the red flag that we're meant to pay attention to and self-correct. But we don't. We power through it. We push harder. We ignore what our minds and bodies are trying to tell us about our environment that we're trying to exist in. In understanding well-being and knowing how to protect it, we can be intentional in our lives instead of being overwhelmed, struggling, being reactive, and being driven by our emotions, by our environment. So I created a system to be able to communicate with ourselves, and Daniel will pass these around. And Daniel will appreciate this because of his flight background, but the intention of the triangle is for you to remember that oxygen mask of your well-being. And when your oxygen is cut off, what happens, Daniel?
Hypoxia.
You fall asleep. Before you die, you fall asleep. Human beings are falling asleep in their lives at a rapid rate because their oxygen is being cut off without them being consciously aware of it, without it being, you know, nobody wakes up and goes, you know what, today I'm going to go out and I'm going to get myself an addiction and it's going to be great. You know, that doesn't happen. But we're such a judgmental society that will see the outcome of somebody's human pain and go, wow, they're a loser, they're a drunk, they're a whatever that is, instead of seeing the human being that's fallen asleep in their life and helping them to wake up. This little card has helped people all over the world to be able to have a constructive conversation with themselves, to be able to have a constructive conversation with a loved one, to be able to say, it's okay, you're just not awake. Something is impacting your well-being that you maybe can't see. Let's help you get to that information, that gap in your learning. Awareness. What are you not aware of that's impacting your either internal self or your external self? Being able to really spend some time thinking about the environment that you're putting yourself in. Is it sustainable? What do you need? Often when I've sat down with people, you know, they've never even spent 1 minute of their life thinking about what their needs are and how to meet them in a constructive way. And this is not about blame, because we're being fed so much garbage 24/7 that there is no blame here for being confused, for being overwhelmed, for being asleep in your life. Blame is irrelevant. It's about helping people to assess that point in their life and helping them to grow out of it, to grow through it. Authenticity. How many people do you know right now who are living fake lives, trying to be something that they're not? It's unsustainable. Our bodies are built in an incredible way that we can endure things short term. Incredible things short term. But when our mind can see that this is going to go on and on and on and on and that there's no end in sight, what do you think happens? That those unmet needs, those unmet thoughts manifest. You know, pain that is left unprocessed by the mind doesn't go away. It manifests, and it is often transferred. Keeping your eyes forward. This is important to be able to recognise where you are living each day. Are you drowning in regret, or are you freaking out about a future that's not promised? Are you actually present right now and being able to be okay with who you are right now and not chasing some pinned happiness that's elsewhere? Keeping your eyes forward is also related to purpose, because what keeps a person motivated and moving forward is the external use of your unique gifts and talents. And everyday mindfulness. Now that can be the actual practice of mindfulness, but it's also being mindful of what you're consuming, how much sleep you're getting, what environment you're putting yourself in, what words are coming out of your mouth, what words are in your head. Negative self-talk is so destructive, and it's invisible. You can never know what's going on inside of another person's head. But if you have a conversation about being mindful of how you speak to yourself, that can have a huge impact on other people. And on the back, the SENSES acronym is to motivate you to know what is driving your behaviour. Are you being driven from stress? You know, how can you meet that and build realistic expectations of yourself and others? How do you put up boundaries where you've never been shown how to put them up or where they should go? You know, there is no quick fix, there's no magic pill. There's work that needs to be done on an individual level for us to grow collectively as a society. Because right now, we've essentially stalled. Mental health, addictions and struggle are taking out the modern world at a rapid rate. World Health Organization has called for countries to take it seriously. And these are developed countries, not the third world. This is an actual epidemic, because we've never actually been taught how to be sustainable as human beings. We've been expected to know how to exist rather than know how to intentionally live. Are you escaping? You know, what are you not facing in your life? Are you just trying to numb pain that your body is prompting you to listen to and learn from so you can let it go? Are you operating out of fear? It makes sense. We're fed fear 24/7. You've only got to turn on the TV and you'll be fed some. Do you need an adrenaline rush? You know, how can you meet that need of excitement in your life that isn't destructive? How can you use it to connect with others in a constructive way? And are you feeling secure within yourself, within your relationships with others, within your environment? The work that I do in speaking in schools and workplaces and universities, I brought a documentary out from the US. It's called Resilience, the Biology of Stress and the Science of Hope. And it creates an environment where the audience is finally able to see the adversity that's all around us, yet nobody speaks of. And then they're willing to actually have an honest conversation with themselves and look at ways in which we're meant to grow through the adversity instead of being defined by it. The birthplace of resilience is a positive relationship. And that can be an actual human relationship. It only takes one positive adult in a person's life to give them enough strength to endure incredible traumas. But the positive relationship that I mostly refer to is you developing a positive relationship with your trauma, your adversity, your struggle. Because when you can look at it in the light and learn from it and see it and not be afraid of it, then it doesn't own you. It has no power over you. My struggle now is this freckle on my arm. You know, it's part of me, it happened, but it's not who I am. And it's helped me to learn information that I would have never thought to look for, that I'd never been given. And that was a big part of me transitioning from recovery to being restored. When I forgave myself for information I'd never possessed. How can you hold yourself accountable for information you never had? That moment has had incredible impact in so many people's lives because they're operating under this, I should have known better. Why did I do this? I'm a bad person. What's wrong with me? And it's mostly because the vernacular around addiction and struggle is so toxic that, and heavily stigmatised, that people don't want to engage with it. Because let's face it, as a society, we'd much rather be comfortable than be able to rest in the discomfort of being human. But that's not what we're called to be. At least not if we want to be sustainable. Looking at the history of pain in our society, in our country, you don't even have to look that far. We're only 200 and something years old here. And if you look at the birthplace of the Australia we know today, it's been built on pain. It's been built on struggle. And the industries who exploit human vulnerabilities, well, it's been just cash cow after cash cow. Think about all the big industries. Think about the narrative of our society and its relationship with those products. You know, it's so deeply interwoven into Australian heritage that we actually think it's part of our culture. Oh yeah, drinking and gambling, you know, they're just part of Australian culture. Yes, they've been present since the destructive early days, but they had no other means of dealing with the trauma that they were facing on a day-to-day basis. And those industries have grown exponentially from that point. But do they serve us as a culture? We need to give some conscious thought to that and decide what narrative makes sense moving forward. And really looking at the exploitation of human pain in our culture. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk with you today, and I welcome any comments that you might have or questions.
Well done.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Makes you think, doesn't it? And you have to be self-aware, you have to keep questioning, and this is part of today, is asking better questions. The questions that you ask yourself will determine the quality of your life, but also the quality of life of your children as well. You've got a lot of responsibilities on your shoulders. So if you have any questions or if you'd like to share anything, please go ahead now. any questions for Kate and the work that she's doing, or where you can find out more about it?
Sure. The Hope Project, well, the website is there. So I have screenings of the documentary in workplaces or schools. I was at a school last night showing the teachers, and they were just mind blown about how trauma impacts on our human biology and behaviour, and it's all interlinked. I was at the addiction conference earlier this year and was gobsmacked to hear that the module of addiction isn't a prerequisite for GPs or psychologists. Like, what? We're not even speaking the same language at a professional level, let alone at a community-based level. That's why there is so much disconnect that, anyway, I could go on and on.
Look, it is sad. There's so many controversial topics we talk about when it comes to how we've been kind of conditioned over the years.
Yeah.
But I do deal with clients that have addictions, and I have never been in a position where I've been that heavy addicted to kind of drugs or alcohol or gambling and such. And for me to kind of help that person through it, some of the struggles, I'd love to know what was the first thing you did to get yourself out of that kind of mentality or whatever struggle all the time.
Yes.
First, like, step you got you out of it.
You have to understand that at that point in time, your brain has been hijacked. So just because a person may, especially with gambling addiction, you appear normal, you're not slurring like you are if you're drinking, you're not, there's no physical alteration, but your mind has been hijacked. So until you are removed from that thing, to regain control, to calm your nervous system down, to regain control of your mind, you need help in that initial period. But does that, that's where it kind of gets a bit lost in translation. Then people go, oh, well, you're in recovery then forever and you're going to be afraid of this thing, and, you're less than because you've experienced a struggle. No, you've been impacted by a product, and removal of that, and then making a conscious choice to decide whether or not that thing makes sense in your life. And I say to people, it's like, if you have a gluten intolerance, do you walk around like this for the rest of your life? Like, I can't go near gluten, it's not good for my body. Well, do you want to have that relationship with that thing and go, you know what, it doesn't make sense for me to engage with that anymore. It's going to harm my well-being. And it's an empowered choice rather than you can't do that anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah, reframing it. But when you shift the focus to where's the gap in your well-being, then you're not even focusing on that thing anyway, and that need for it becomes irrelevant.
Change the focus, obviously.
Definitely.
So you're staying away from that focus on what you can do instead.
It's the restoration of you. What environment are you trying to exist in? Help them to figure that out and look at that clearly rather than focus on this one element of their behaviour. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I see a lot of people that numb themselves with antidepressants.
Absolutely.
Do you include antidepressants in your addiction program?
Yeah. Right now, listening to the latest, people are using Nurofen, just as badly as they are antidepressants. Some people are up to 100 tablets a day. That level of dependency, and it's it's just available, and their tolerance builds, and because they're not actually dealing with what is driving the behaviour. Yeah, absolutely.
Just take one more question and then.
It can be sometimes a difficult conversation to have if you see someone you think is having
trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any recommendations on how to break the ice and have that conversation with someone that you might need it?
I always say lead with your own vulnerability, because that creates connection. That creates a pathway, a safety for somebody to feel comfortable about their own humanness. So if if there's this power imbalance of I've got all my stuff together and you don't, what do you think's going to happen? Walls are going to go up, and a person's not going to feel safe enough to go there. But to lead with whatever struggle looks like in your world opens up that pathway for others to be comfortable. And if you feel like you don't have anything to draw on, get someone who does, who can speak that language, helping to walk with them, rather than, this is your problem, you have to solve it. At that point in time, that person is drowning in shame. They're mentally, physically, emotionally overwhelmed, and they're desperately needing help and support and compassion, not judgment and shame. And does that make sense? Thank you.